I still remember the day my son brought Emma home for the first time. It was a crisp October afternoon, and the leaves were doing that beautiful thing where they turn every shade of gold and red you can imagine. Hello, my lovely listeners. It still feels a bit surreal that you're here listening to me tell these stories. This is a new journey for me, and knowing you're sitting with me, maybe with a cup of tea or coffee, makes it so special. If this tale is moving you, I'd be deeply thankful if you'd show some love with a like. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and share in the comments where in the world you are right now. Your words always make me feel like we're all sitting together. Ready? Let's keep going. I was in the kitchen making my famous apple pie, the one my mother taught me to make when I was just a girl, and I heard the front door open, followed by my son Michael's voice calling out, "Mom, we're here." I wiped my hands on my apron and rushed to the living room, and there she was, Emma. She had this warm smile that lit up her whole face, shoulder-length brown hair that caught the afternoon light coming through the windows, and she was holding a bouquet of sunflowers, my absolute favorite. "Mrs. Peterson," she said, extending the flowers to me, "Michael told me you loved these. I hope it's okay that I brought them." I was charmed immediately. What mother wouldn't be? Here was this thoughtful young woman who'd taken the time to find out what I liked, who seemed genuinely nervous about making a good impression, who looked at my son like he hung the moon. We spent that whole afternoon talking and laughing, and by the time they left, I was already thinking about wedding bells. Michael had always been my baby, even though he was 28 years old and a successful software engineer. His father, my late husband Robert, had passed away 5 years earlier from a sudden heart attack, and after that it had just been the two of us. Michael had been so worried about me, checking in constantly, making sure I wasn't lonely in this big house. So when he found someone who made him happy, someone who seemed kind and caring and genuine, I was over the moon. Emma started coming around more often. She'd stop by on weekends, sometimes even during the week after work. She was a paralegal at a downtown law firm, and she'd tell me stories about her cases. Nothing confidential, of course, just funny anecdotes about her boss or the quirky clients they dealt with. She'd help me in the garden, we'd watch old movies together, and she even asked me to teach her how to make my pie. "I want to be able to make this for Michael," she said one Saturday afternoon, her hands covered in flour as we worked the dough together. "He talks about it all the time, says it's the taste of home." My heart just melted. Here was this young woman who wanted to learn family traditions, who cared about making my son happy, who seemed to genuinely enjoy spending time with me. I'd lost my own mother 10 years earlier, and I'd been an only child, so I'd never had a daughter or a sister. Emma was filling a space in my life I hadn't even realized was empty. When Michael proposed to her on Christmas Eve, I cried happy tears. He did it right here in my living room, in front of the tree we'd all decorated together, with me as the only witness. Emma said yes through her own tears, and then she hugged me so tight and whispered, "I'm so lucky to be joining this family." The wedding planning was a dream. Emma included me in everything: the dress shopping, the venue selection, the menu tasting. She asked for my opinion on flowers, on music, on whether we should have a chocolate or vanilla cake. She even wanted to incorporate some of my late husband's favorite songs into the reception. "I never got to meet him," she told me one day over coffee, "but I want him to be part of our day. Michael says you two had the most beautiful love story." We did. Robert and I had been married for 32 years when he passed, and not a day went by that I didn't miss him. But having Emma around, planning this wedding, watching my son so happy, it felt like life was moving forward in a good way, like maybe the hardest part of my grief was behind me. The wedding itself was beautiful, small, intimate, just family and close friends at a lovely little vineyard about an hour outside the city. Emma looked absolutely radiant, and Michael couldn't stop smiling. During the reception, Emma pulled me aside and said, "Thank you for raising such an incredible man. I promise I'll take care of him." "And I know he'll take care of you," I told her, squeezing her hands. They moved into a cute little townhouse about 20 minutes from me, close enough to visit regularly, but far enough that they had their own space. Emma continued to stop by often, and I loved it. We'd have lunch together, go shopping, or sometimes she'd just come over to talk. She'd tell me about her day, about funny things that happened at work, about the little renovations they were planning for the townhouse. "You know," she said one afternoon about 6 months after the wedding, "I've always wanted to have a garden like yours. When I was growing up, we lived in apartments, so we never had space for one. Do you think you could help me plan one for our little backyard?" Of course, I said yes. We spent weeks researching plants, drawing up layouts, picking out the perfect spots for vegetables and flowers. When we finally got everything planted, she insisted I come over every week to check on how things were growing. It felt wonderful to share something I loved with someone who seemed genuinely interested. Around their first anniversary, I started thinking about a special gift I wanted to give Emma. In my jewelry box, carefully wrapped in velvet, was my mother's engagement ring. It was a beautiful piece, a platinum band with a stunning 2-carat emerald-cut diamond, flanked by 2 smaller diamonds. My mother had received it from my father in 1945, right after he came home from the war. She'd worn it every day until she passed, and then she'd left it to me. I'd always assumed I'd pass it on to Michael for his future wife when the time came, but things had moved so quickly with Emma that he'd already bought her a ring before I'd had the chance to offer my mother's ring. Emma's engagement ring was lovely, a classic solitaire that Michael had chosen carefully, but I knew my mother's ring was special. It had history, it had meaning, and I wanted Emma to have this piece of family history. I thought about it for weeks. The ring was worth quite a bit. My mother had had it appraised years ago, and even back then it had been valued at $35,000. I'd had it reappraised myself about 3 years earlier when I was updating my insurance, and the jeweler had valued it at $52,000. It wasn't just about the money, though. This ring represented my parents' love story, my mother's devotion to my father, the sacrifices they'd made to build a life together during hard times. But Emma was family now. She was the daughter I'd never had, the woman my son had chosen to spend his life with, and she'd been nothing but loving and respectful to me, nothing but devoted to Michael. She deserved to have this piece of family history. I decided to give it to her at a small dinner party I was hosting for their first anniversary. I invited them over, along with a few close family friends who'd known Michael since he was a boy. I made all of Michael's favorite dishes and baked a special cake. The evening was perfect. Lots of laughter, good food, stories about Michael and Emma's courtship. And then, after dessert, I stood up and clinked my glass. "I want to say a few words," I began, and everyone quieted down. "A year ago, our family grew when Emma officially became my daughter-in-law, but honestly, she's felt like my daughter from almost the first day I met her. Emma, you've brought so much joy into our lives, and you've made my son happier than I've ever seen him. I wanted to give you something special to mark this first year of marriage." I pulled out the velvet box I'd been hiding in the sideboard and walked over to Emma. She looked surprised, her eyes wide, as I handed it to her. "This was my mother's engagement ring," I said, my voice getting a bit thick with emotion. "It wore it for almost 50 years, and when she passed, she left it to me. I want you to have it now. You're part of this family, part of this legacy, and I know my mother would have loved you just as much as I do." Emma opened the box, and I saw her breath catch. The ring sparkled under the dining room lights, and for a moment everyone was silent, just admiring it. Then Emma's eyes filled with tears. She stood up and hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. "Mom," she said. She'd started calling me Mom about 6 months earlier, which had touched me deeply. "I can't believe this. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Are you sure?" "I'm absolutely sure," I told her. "It belongs with you now." Michael came over and looked at the ring, and I could see he was getting emotional too. "Mom, this is incredibly generous," he said. "I remember Grandma wearing this. She never took it off." "She didn't," I confirmed, "and now Emma can wear it and think of all the love that came before her." Emma slipped it onto her right hand. She said she wanted to wear it but keep her engagement ring on her left hand, which I thought was sweet. She kept looking at it all evening, holding her hand up to the light, turning it this way and that. She must have thanked me a dozen times before they left that night. "I'll treasure this forever," she promised as they were heading out the door. "I'll never take it off." I went to bed that night feeling so content, so happy with my decision. I'd given something precious to someone I loved, someone I trusted, someone who would appreciate its history and meaning. The next morning, I was in the kitchen having my coffee and reading the newspaper when my phone rang. It was Michael, and I could tell immediately that something was wrong. His voice had this tight quality to it, like he was barely holding himself together. "Mom," he said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." My stomach clenched. "Of course, honey, what's wrong?" "The ring you gave Emma last night," he said, "is it real? I mean, is it valuable?" I was confused by the question. "Yes, of course it's real. It's been in our family for 70 years. Why are you asking?" There was a long pause, and then Michael said something that made my blood run cold. "Mom, I found a receipt in Emma's purse this morning. She took the ring to 3 different jewelry stores first thing today. She's trying to sell it." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "What? Michael, that's not... There must be some mistake. Maybe she was just getting it appraised for insurance purposes." "That's what I thought at first," Michael said, and his voice cracked. "But Mom, one of the receipts says offer to purchase and has a number on it, $48,000. She's trying to sell Grandma's ring." I sat down heavily in my kitchen chair. My hands were shaking. "Where is she now?" "She left for work. She doesn't know I found the receipts." "Mom, I don't know what to do. I don't understand why she would do this. You just gave it to her last night. She stood in our living room and cried and said she'd treasure it forever." I tried to keep my voice calm, tried to think clearly, even though my heart was pounding. "Michael, don't do anything yet. Don't confront her until we figure out what's really going on. Maybe there's an explanation." But even as I said it, I didn't believe it. What possible explanation could there be? You don't take a family heirloom to multiple jewelry stores the very next morning unless you're planning to sell it. You don't get purchase offers unless that's exactly what you're trying to do. After I hung up with Michael, I just sat there in my kitchen for a long time, staring at my coffee cup. I felt sick. I felt betrayed. But more than anything, I felt stupid. How could I have not seen this coming? Had there been signs I'd missed? I started thinking back over the past year and a half, trying to remember if there had been any red flags. And slowly, little things started coming back to me. Things I'd brushed off at the time, things I'd made excuses for. Like the time about 3 months after they got married when Emma had asked me about my financial situation. She'd framed it as concern, said she wanted to make sure I was okay living alone, that I could afford to maintain the house, that I wasn't struggling. At the time, I thought it was sweet that she cared. I told her I was fine, that Robert had left me well taken care of, that I had a good pension and savings. That's such a relief, she'd said. Michael worries about you being in this big house all alone. We've even talked about whether you might want to sell it someday and get something smaller, or maybe even move in with us. I laughed it off, told her I wasn't ready to leave my home yet, that I had too many memories here. She'd smiled and said, "Of course, I completely understand, but just know the offer is always there." Then there was the time she'd asked to borrow my car because hers was in the shop. I'd said yes, of course. What else would I say to my daughter-in-law? But when she returned it, I'd noticed she'd been through my glove compartment. Papers were in a different order, and my insurance documents had been moved. When I'd mentioned it casually, she got flustered and said she'd been looking for a napkin and must have accidentally messed things up. And there was the afternoon she'd shown up unexpectedly and found me going through some old family photos. She'd been very interested in them, asking questions about my parents, about their lives, about what they'd owned. "Did your father have a good job?" she'd asked, studying a photo of my parents in front of their first house. "He did well enough," I'd said. "He was a banker. He worked hard and saved carefully." "And your mother, did she work?" "Not outside the home. That wasn't as common back then." Emma had nodded thoughtfully. "But they must have had some money if they could afford a ring like the one you showed me once. That was your mother's, right?" At the time, I thought she was just curious about family history. Now I wondered if she'd been calculating its value. There had been other small things, too. The way she'd asked about my will once, framing it as making sure I had all my affairs in order. The way she'd suggested I should get my jewelry appraised for insurance purposes and even offered to help me catalog everything. The way she'd casually mentioned that their townhouse was getting cramped and they were thinking about a bigger place but couldn't quite afford it yet. I'd missed it all. Or maybe I didn't want to see it. She'd been so warm, so loving, so good at playing the devoted daughter-in-law that I'd convinced myself any odd behavior was just me being paranoid or misinterpreting things. But this, trying to sell my mother's ring less than 24 hours after I'd given it to her, this I couldn't misinterpret. This was clear. This was undeniable. My phone rang again. It was Michael. "Mom?" he said. I confronted her, and I could hear his anguish in his voice. I couldn't wait. I called her at work and asked her about the ring. She denied it at first, said I was crazy, that I'd misread the receipts, but when I told her I'd called one of the jewelers and they'd confirmed she'd been in asking about selling a vintage emerald-cut diamond ring, she finally admitted it. "What did she say?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She said she thought it was just a gift, that she didn't realize it was supposed to be some sacred family heirloom. She said she and I need money for a house, and this was just a practical way to get it. She said you're old and you're probably not going to be around much longer anyway, so what difference does it make if she sells it now or inherits it later? I actually gasped. The cruelty of it, the coldness, it was like being slapped. "Mom, I'm so sorry," he said, and he was crying now. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know she was like this. I swear I didn't know." "I know you didn't, honey," I said, trying to keep my voice steady for his sake, even though I was falling apart inside. "Michael, I need you to get that ring back today, before she has a chance to actually sell it." "I know. I already called her and told her I'm coming to her office to get it. She said she doesn't have it with her, that it's at home. I'm leaving work now to go to the townhouse. Call me as soon as you have it. And Michael, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry this is happening. It's not your fault. None of this is your fault." But I felt like it was. I felt like I'd been so desperate for a daughter, so eager to have Emma in my life that I'd ignored every warning sign. I'd handed my mother's precious ring to someone who saw it as nothing more than a commodity to be sold. Michael called me back an hour later. He had the ring. Emma had lied about it not being at home. He'd found it in her jewelry box along with printouts of the offers she'd received from the different jewelers. The highest offer was $48,000, and she was planning to go back to that jeweler during her lunch break to finalize the sale. I took the ring, and I took the receipts, Michael, and I took pictures of everything in case we need evidence later.
Evidence for what? I asked. I don't know yet, he admitted. Maybe nothing, or maybe for a divorce. That word hung in the air between us. Divorce. After just over a year of marriage, because his wife had tried to sell a family heirloom I'd entrusted to her out of love? When Michael arrived at my house, he looked terrible. His eyes were red, his face was pale, and he looked like he'd aged 5 years in a single day. He handed me the velvet box with the ring inside, and I held it in my hands, feeling the weight of it, the history of it. I don't understand, he said, sitting down heavily on my couch. How did neither of us see this? We talked for hours that afternoon. We went through everything, every moment, every interaction, everything Emma had said or done that might have been a clue to who she really was. And the more we talked, the more things came to light. Michael told me that Emma had been pushing him to ask me for money for months. She wanted a bigger house, wanted to go on expensive vacations, wanted things they couldn't quite afford on their 2 salaries. She'd suggested more than once that I might be willing to help them out, that I probably had more money than I needed living alone in my big house. She kept saying you'd probably want to help us, Michael said. She'd say things like, your mom loves you so much, I'm sure she'd want to see us in a nice home. Or, your mom mentioned her investment portfolio, maybe she'd consider being an investor in our future. Michael had always refused, said we should make it on our own, that asking me for money didn't feel right. Now he was glad he'd stood his ground, but he was also wondering what else Emma might have been planning. Do you think the ring was just the beginning? He asked. Do you think she had some bigger plan? I didn't know, but I was starting to worry that maybe she did. That evening, Emma started texting and calling Michael. At first, her messages were apologetic. She said she'd made a mistake, that she'd panicked about money and hadn't been thinking clearly. She said she loved him, loved me, and would never actually have sold the ring. But when Michael didn't respond the way she wanted, when he didn't immediately forgive her and tell her everything was fine, her tone changed. The messages became angry. She said we were both being dramatic. She said I was a controlling mother who couldn't let go of her son. She said Michael was choosing me over his wife, and that wasn't how marriage was supposed to work. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. She texted Michael, your mother is old and has no one but you. She's probably got that house and all those investments and all that jewelry, and who's it all going to go to? Us, eventually. So what difference does it make if I sell one ring now or we inherit everything later? I'm just accelerating the inevitable. Michael showed me the text, his hands shaking. She's been planning this, he said. This wasn't impulsive. She's been thinking about your money, your assets, what she can get from you. I felt sick. How long had she been playing this role? How much of our relationship had been real, and how much had been calculated manipulation? Michael, I said slowly, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Has Emma ever mentioned my will? Has she ever asked you what's in it? Michael's face went pale. Yes, he admitted. About 6 months ago, she asked if you'd updated your will since Dad died. She said she was just concerned that everything was in order for you. I told her I didn't know the details, that it wasn't really my business, but that I assumed you had everything handled. What did she say to that? She seemed disappointed that I didn't know more. She asked if you had any other family, anyone else who might inherit. I told her no, that it was just me after you, and then she dropped it. I sat back, thinking. Emma had been gathering information. She'd been trying to figure out what I had, what it was worth, and how she could get access to it, either through Michael or directly. The ring hadn't been enough. She wanted more, and if I had died without knowing what she really was, she would have gotten it all eventually, or at least Michael would have, and she would have had access to it through him. Mom, Michael said, what are we going to do?
That was the question, wasn't it? What was I going to do? Emma was my daughter-in-law. She was married to my son. We couldn't just pretend this hadn't happened, but we also couldn't just move forward as if nothing was wrong. First, I said, I'm going to call my lawyer on Monday. I need to make sure my will is ironclad and that Emma has no possible claim to anything if something happens to me. That seems smart, Michael agreed. Second, I continued, I'm going to gather documentation of everything, the receipts from the jewelers, the texts she sent, anything else that shows what she tried to do. I don't know if I'll need it, but I want to have it. And third, Michael asked, Third, you need to decide what you want to do about your marriage, I said gently. I can't make that decision for you, but Michael, you need to understand that this isn't just about the ring. This is about who Emma really is. This is about the fact that she's been lying to both of us, manipulating both of us, and planning to profit from our relationship. That's not going to change just because she got caught. Michael nodded slowly. I know. I think I already know what I need to do. I just need to be ready for how ugly it's going to get. He was right about that. It got ugly fast. Emma showed up at my house 2 days later, pounding on the door and demanding to be let in. I'd been prepared for this, so I had my phone ready to record. I opened the door but kept the screen door locked between us. You need to give me back that ring, she said without preamble. That was a gift. You gave it to me. You can't just take it back. I didn't take it back, I said calmly. Michael took it back because you were in the process of trying to sell it. That ring is a family heirloom, Emma. It's been in our family for 3 generations. It was never meant to be sold for cash. You gave it to me, she repeated, her face flushed with anger. That makes it mine. I can do whatever I want with it. If I want to sell it, that's my business. And if you'd waited a respectful amount of time, if you'd come to me and explained that you needed money and asked if I'd consider buying it back or helping you in some other way, maybe we could have had a conversation about it. But you didn't do that. You took it to jewelers the very next morning and tried to sell it behind my back. That's not the action of someone who treasures a family heirloom. That's the action of someone who sees our family as an ATM. How dare you, Emma hissed. I've been nothing but good to you. I've spent time with you. I've listened to your boring stories. I've pretended to care about your stupid garden and your stupid recipes. And this is how you repay me? There it was. The mask was off. All the pretense of loving me, of wanting to be close to me, it had all been an act. I think you should leave, I said quietly. I'm not leaving without that ring. That ring is worth $50,000. Do you know what I could do with $50,000? Buy a house, I suggested, because that's what you told Michael you needed the money for. She actually sneered at that. The house is just the beginning. Do you have any idea how much debt I'm in? I've got credit cards maxed out. I've got student loans. I've got car payments. Michael's salary is decent, but it's not enough to live the life I want to live. I need more. Then you should probably get a better job, I said, or learn to live within your means. You're not getting the ring, Emma, and you're not getting anything else from me. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her recalculating, trying to figure out a different angle. Fine, she finally said. Keep the ring, but you're going to regret this. Michael is my husband. When you die, everything you have goes to him, which means it goes to me too, so I'll get it all eventually. I can wait. We'll see about that, I said, and closed the door in her face. My hands were shaking after she left, but I had the whole conversation on video. I immediately sent it to Michael and to my lawyer. What Emma didn't know was that I'd already met with my lawyer that morning. His name was Richard Chen, and he'd been handling my legal affairs since Robert died. When I'd called him Monday morning and explained the situation, he'd fit me in for an emergency appointment. This is a delicate situation, Richard said after hearing the whole story. Emma is your daughter-in-law, which means she doesn't have any direct legal claim to your assets unless you specifically named her in your will or given her joint ownership of something.
But if she remains married to Michael, anything he inherits will potentially become marital property, which means she'd have access to it. So what are my options? I asked. Richard laid it out for me. I could update my will to create a trust that would protect Michael's inheritance from being claimed by Emma in a divorce. I could make specific provisions that any inheritance would be considered separate property, not marital property. I could even create a trust that controlled the assets and only distribute income to Michael, keeping the principal protected. The key is to be very specific and very clear about your intentions, Richard had explained. We need to make it impossible for Emma to argue that any of your assets belong to her or should be accessible to her. We'd spent 3 hours updating my will and creating the trust structure. Everything I owned, the house, my investments, my savings, my jewelry, even my personal effects would go into a trust for Michael's benefit. The trust would be controlled by Richard as trustee, with very specific instructions about how and when Michael could access the funds. Most importantly, the trust documents explicitly stated that any inheritance was Michael's separate property and could not be claimed by a spouse in a divorce. This is fairly aggressive, Richard had warned me. If Emma finds out about this, she's not going to be happy. I don't care if she's happy, I'd said. I care about protecting my son and protecting what Robert and I worked our whole lives to build. I'm not going to let some manipulative gold digger get her hands on it. Richard had also advised me to document everything, every interaction with Emma, every text message, every email. If this ends up in divorce court, Michael is going to need evidence of her behavior and her motivations. The more documentation you have, the better. So that's what I'd been doing. I'd been keeping a detailed log of everything, saving every message, recording every interaction. And after Emma's little visit to my house, I had clear video evidence of her true intentions. Michael called me that evening after Emma had apparently gone back to their townhouse and confronted him. "She's furious," he said. "She knows I told you what she said. She's demanding to know where the ring is. She's threatening to call the police and say we stole it from her." "Let her call the police," I said calmly. "I have receipts showing that the ring was my mother's, that it was in my possession until I gave it to her as a gift. I also have video of her admitting she tried to sell it and saying she only wants it for the money. If she calls the police, she's just going to make herself look bad." "She also said she's going to make you regret this," Michael said, worry in his voice. "She said she has ways of making your life miserable." "Let her try," I said, though I'll admit I felt a chill when he said that. "Michael, I need to know, what are you going to do about your marriage?" There was a long pause. "I already contacted a divorce attorney," he finally said. "I met with her this afternoon. Her name is Patricia Morrison, and she specializes in high-conflict divorces. She thinks I have grounds for an annulment based on fraud, but a divorce might be cleaner. Either way, she's confident we can protect me from any claims Emma might try to make." I felt a weight lift off my chest. "I'm proud of you," I told him. "I know this can't be easy." "It's not," he admitted. "I loved her, Mom. Or at least I loved who I thought she was. I keep wondering if any of it was real, or if she was playing me from day one." "I don't know, honey," I said honestly, "but what I do know is that you deserve better than someone who sees you as a means to an end." The divorce proceedings started the following week. Michael moved out of the townhouse and came to stay with me while things got sorted out. Emma was served with papers, and that's when all hell broke loose. She started calling me at all hours, leaving voicemails that ranged from tearful apologies to screaming threats. She showed up at my house multiple times. She sent me long emails explaining how I'd misunderstood everything, how she really had loved me, how she'd just made one little mistake and couldn't we all move past it? When that didn't work, she changed tactics. She started telling people, mutual friends, people from church, neighbors, that I was a cruel, heartless woman who turned her son against his wife. She said I was controlling and manipulative, that I'd given her the ring and then manufactured an excuse to take it back because I couldn't stand to see Michael happy with someone else. Some people believed her. I lost a few friendships over it, people who took Emma's side without hearing my story. That hurt, I won't lie. But it also showed me who my real friends were, the ones who knew me well enough to know that her version of events didn't make sense. What Emma didn't count on was that Michael had documentation of everything. He had the receipts from the jewelers. He had screenshots of all her text messages, including the one where she talked about me dying and them inheriting everything. He had the video I'd taken of her showing up at my house and admitting she'd only been pretending to care about me. Patricia, Michael's attorney, was a shark. She was probably in her mid-50s with short silver hair and steel blue eyes, and she didn't take any nonsense. When Emma's attorney tried to claim that Emma was entitled to half of everything Michael had, including any gifts from me, Patricia shut it down fast. "My client's mother's gifts are separate property," Patricia said at one of the preliminary hearings I attended. "Moreover, we have substantial evidence that Emma has married my client under fraudulent pretenses and that she has been attempting to access his family's wealth through manipulation and deceit. We will be seeking an annulment based on fraud, or if that's not granted, a divorce with a finding that Emma is not entitled to any property or spousal support due to her misconduct." Emma's lawyer tried to argue, but Patricia had all the documentation. She showed the receipts from the jewelry stores. She played the voicemails Emma had left where she threatened me. She showed the text messages. By the end of it, even Emma's lawyer looked uncomfortable. But Emma wasn't done fighting. If anything, she got more vicious. She started trying to turn Michael's friends against him, telling him he was weak and controlled by his mother, that he couldn't think for himself. She posted things on social media, vague posts about narcissistic family members and manipulative people, clearly meant to be about me. She even tried to get to Michael through his job, calling his boss and trying to make trouble for him there. "She told my boss that I've been unstable," Michael told me one evening, his voice tight with anger. "She said I've been acting erratically and that she was concerned about me working on critical projects. My boss called me in to ask if everything was okay. It was humiliating." "What did you tell him?" I asked. "The truth, that I'm going through a divorce and my soon-to-be ex-wife is trying to sabotage my career. I showed him some of the threatening messages she's been sending. He was actually really understanding about it, but Mom, this is getting out of control." Patricia advised us to get a restraining order. She said Emma's behavior had crossed the line from upset spouse to harassment. So we went to court and got a temporary restraining order that required Emma to stay at least 500 feet from me, Michael, and his workplace. You'd think that would calm things down. It didn't. 2 weeks after the restraining order was issued, I came home from grocery shopping to find someone had been in my house. Nothing was missing, but things had been moved. Drawers had been opened, files had been gone through. The lock on my back door had been jimmied. I called the police immediately. They came out and took a report, dusted for fingerprints. They didn't find much, but they did find evidence of forced entry. They asked if I knew who might have done it. "I have a pretty good idea," I said, and showed them the restraining order against Emma. The officer looked at it and nodded. "We'll follow up on this," he said. "In the meantime, you might want to consider changing your locks and maybe installing a security system." I did both that same day. I had a locksmith come out and rekey all my locks, and I had a security company install cameras around my house and a monitoring system inside. It felt strange turning my home into a fortress, but I also felt better knowing I had evidence if Emma tried anything else. And she tried something else. A week after the restraining order was issued, my security cameras caught her driving slowly past my house multiple times, despite the restraining order. I sent the footage to the police and to Patricia. Patricia filed a motion to hold Emma in contempt of court. At the contempt hearing, Emma actually tried to claim she didn't know she wasn't supposed to drive past my house, that the restraining order didn't specify she couldn't use public streets. The judge wasn't having it. "Ms. Carter," the judge said sternly, "the restraining order is quite clear. You are to stay at least 500 feet from Mrs. Peterson and her residence. That means you don't drive past her house, you don't walk past her house, you don't go anywhere near her house. Do you understand?" Emma had nodded sullenly. "I'm going to give you one warning," the judge continued. "If you violate this order again, you will be arrested and you will face criminal charges. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor," Emma muttered. But I could see in her eyes that she wasn't done fighting. She was just getting started. The divorce proceedings dragged on for months. Emma kept finding new ways to delay everything, to make demands, to cause problems. She claimed Michael owed her spousal support even though they'd only been married for a year and she had her own job. She claimed she was entitled to half of everything he had, including money his father had left him, savings he'd had before they even met, and even gifts I'd given him over the years. Patricia shot down every claim methodically and efficiently. She presented evidence that Emma had her own income, her own career, and no legitimate need for support. She showed that Michael's premarital assets were clearly separate property. She demonstrated that gifts from me to Michael were not marital property. What really helped our case, though, was when Patricia subpoenaed Emma's financial records. That's when things got really interesting. It turned out Emma had been lying about a lot more than just her feelings for our family. She had over $90,000 in credit card debt that she'd never told Michael about. She'd taken out personal loans, opened store credit cards, and maxed out every line of credit she could get her hands on. And she'd done most of it during their marriage, hiding the bills and the statements from Michael. "She's been living way beyond her means for years," Patricia explained to us in her office. "Looking at her spending patterns, she was counting on having access to your family's money to pay all this off. When she realized Michael wasn't going to ask you for money, she started looking for other ways to get it. That's why she went after the ring." "But $90,000? Michael said, looking shell-shocked. "How did I not know?" "She was very careful," Patricia said. "She had statements sent to a P.O. box. She paid minimum payments out of her own account. She was keeping it compartmentalized. My guess is she was planning to tell you about the debt eventually, once she'd figured out a way to access your mother's money to pay it off." "This is insane," Michael said. "I thought I knew her. I thought we had an honest relationship. How much else did she lie about?" As it turned out, quite a lot. Once Patricia started digging, more lies came to light. Emma hadn't actually graduated from college like she told us. She dropped out in her senior year and had been lying about having her degree for years. The law firm where she worked as a paralegal had actually put her on probation 3 months earlier for billing irregularities, something she'd never mentioned to Michael. And she'd been evicted from her last apartment before meeting Michael, which was why she'd been so eager to move in with him quickly. "She saw you as her ticket out of her mess," Patricia told Michael, "and when she realized you weren't going to be as easy to manipulate as she'd hoped, she set her sights on your mother's assets instead." It was like watching a house of cards collapse. Every new piece of information made me realize how thoroughly we'd been conned. Emma had constructed an entire fake persona, and we'd both fallen for it. But here's the thing. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was determined. Emma had tried to use me, tried to use my son, tried to steal from our family, and I was going to make sure she faced consequences for all of it. I started making phone calls. I called the law firm where Emma worked and spoke to the managing partner. I didn't tell him what to do, but I did inform him that Emma was currently under a restraining order for harassment and that she had a pattern of dishonest behavior. I suggested he might want to look more carefully at those billing irregularities. 2 weeks later, Emma was fired. I also did some research into whether what Emma had done could be considered criminal. I spoke with a detective I'd been referred to by my lawyer, and we discussed the possibility of theft charges or fraud charges related to her attempt to sell the ring. The detective said it was a gray area. Technically, I'd given her the ring, so it might be hard to prove theft, but the fact that she tried to sell it immediately, combined with evidence of her fraudulent intent in the marriage, might be enough to at least investigate. "Let me talk to the prosecutor's office," the detective said. "I can't promise anything, but with all the documentation you have, there might be a case here." In the meantime, Patricia continued to destroy Emma in the divorce proceedings. Every time Emma's lawyer tried to claim something, Patricia had evidence to refute it. Every time Emma lied, and she lied constantly, Patricia caught her in it. The low point for Emma came during her deposition. A deposition is where the opposing lawyer gets to ask you questions under oath, and everything you say is recorded and can be used against you in court. Patricia had been preparing for this deposition for weeks, and she had a strategy. She started with simple questions, background stuff, easy things. Then she started asking about Emma's finances. How much debt did she have? When did she incur it? Did she tell Michael about it? Why not? Emma tried to dance around the questions, but Patricia was relentless. She had bank statements, credit card statements, loan documents. Every time Emma tried to lie or minimize, Patricia would pull out another document proving she was lying. Then Patricia moved on to the ring. She asked Emma to walk through exactly what happened, when I gave it to her, what I said, what Emma was thinking. She asked if she knew the ring was a family heirloom. Emma had to admit she did. "So when Mrs. Peterson gave you this ring and told you it had been her mother's, that her mother had worn it for 50 years, and that she wanted you to have it as part of the family legacy, what did you think?" "I thought it was a nice gift," Emma said carefully. "And what did you do the very next morning?" Her lawyer objected, said the question had been asked and answered, but Patricia rephrased. "Isn't it true that less than 24 hours after receiving this family heirloom, you took it to 3 different jewelry stores to get offers to purchase it?" Emma had to admit it was true. "And isn't it also true that you got an offer of $48,000 from one of those jewelers?" "Yes." "And were you planning to accept that offer?" Emma hesitated. "I was considering it." "Did you tell your husband you were considering selling his grandmother's ring?" "No." "Did you tell your mother-in-law?" "No." "So you were planning to secretly sell a family heirloom worth $48,000 and keep the money for yourself?" "I needed the money," Emma said, and there was a defiant edge to her voice now. "Michael wasn't making enough, and his mother was sitting on all that money." Patricia cut her off. "So you felt entitled to sell Mrs. Peterson's property to pay your bills?" "She gave it to me," Emma said. "Once she gave it to me, it was mine to do with as I pleased." "Even though you knew it was a family heirloom with sentimental value?" "Sentimental value doesn't pay bills." Patricia smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Let's talk about these bills you mentioned. You have approximately $90,000 in credit card debt, is that correct?" And so it went. By the end of the deposition, Emma had basically admitted to everything: the debt she'd hid, the lies she told, her plan to access my money one way or another. She'd even admitted that she'd been frustrated I wouldn't just die already so they could inherit. Michael sat through the whole thing with his fists clenched, his face pale. Afterwards, he told me, "I can't believe I married her. I can't believe I brought her into our lives." "She fooled both of us," I reminded him. "She's good at what she does, but the important thing is we figured it out before she could do any lasting damage." But Emma wasn't done trying to do damage. When she realized the divorce was not going to go her way, when she understood that she wasn't going to get any money or assets from Michael, she decided to go scorched earth. She started showing up at places she knew Michael and I would be. She'd accidentally run into us at the grocery store, at church, at restaurants. She never got close enough to violate the restraining order. She'd stay just beyond the 500-foot limit, but she'd be there, watching us, making us uncomfortable. Then she escalated. She created fake social media accounts and started posting terrible things about me. She claimed I was abusive, that I'd been cruel to her, that I was a horrible person. She found photos of me online and posted them with nasty captions. She even tried to start a website dedicated to exposing me. Patricia had to file multiple motions to get the content taken down, and we had to get the police involved again. The detective I'd been working with was able to trace the fake accounts back to Emma's IP address. "This is getting into criminal territory," the detective told me. "What she's doing is harassment and possibly libel. We've got enough to charge her if you want to press charges." I looked at Michael, and he nodded. "Do it," he said. "She needs to learn there are consequences." So I pressed charges. Emma was arrested for criminal harassment and violation of the restraining order. She spent a night in jail before her lawyer bailed her out. That seemed to finally get through to her. After the arrest, the harassment stopped. The fake social media accounts went silent. She stopped showing up places. The divorce was finalized about 6 months after Michael first confronted her about the ring. In the end, Emma got nothing. The judge ruled that the marriage had been based on fraud, that Emma had entered it with ulterior motives, and that her subsequent behavior, the attempted sale of the ring, the harassment, the violations of the restraining order, demonstrated that she was not entitled to any marital property or support. Michael got everything he had before the marriage, plus everything he'd earned during the marriage. Emma got exactly what she'd brought into it, which was basically just debt and lies. The judge also ordered Emma to pay Michael's legal fees, which were substantial. Patricia didn't come cheap, but she'd been worth every penny. "This is one of the most clear-cut cases of marital fraud I've seen," the judge said from the bench. "Miss Carter entered this marriage with the intent to access the Peterson family's assets through deception. When that didn't work, she attempted to steal from them directly. Her behavior throughout these proceedings has been appalling. I'm granting Mr. Peterson his divorce and awarding him costs." Emma's face was bright red as the judge spoke. She looked like she wanted to say something, but her lawyer had his hand on her arm, keeping her quiet. But I wasn't done yet. Remember that detective I'd been working with? He'd presented the case to the prosecutor's office, and they decided to move forward with fraud charges related to Emma's conduct during the marriage. The theory was that Emma had made material misrepresentations to induce Michael to marry her. She'd lied about her education, her finances, her intentions, and then she'd attempted to convert my property, the ring, for her own use. While the DA admitted it was a tough case, the evidence was strong enough that they thought they could make it stick. Emma was indicted about 2 months after the divorce was finalized. She was charged with theft by deception and fraud. If convicted, she could face up to 5 years in prison. Her lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutor wasn't interested in going easy on her. They offered her a deal where she'd have to plead guilty, pay restitution, and serve at least 2 years. Emma refused, insisting she wanted to take it to trial. That was a mistake. At trial, Patricia testified about everything she'd discovered during the divorce proceedings. The detective testified about the investigation, Michael testified about Emma's lies and manipulation, and I testified about how Emma had pretended to love me, had spent a year and a half gaining my trust, and had then tried to sell my mother's ring the very next day after I gave it to her.
The prosecutor also brought in a forensic psychologist who testified about patterns of behavior consistent with someone running a long-term con. She explained how people like Emma identify targets, build trust over time, and then exploit that trust for financial gain. Emma's lawyer tried to argue that this was all just a messy divorce, that Emma had made some bad decisions but hadn't committed any crimes. But the jury didn't buy it. They saw through her the same way Patricia had seen through her, the same way Michael and I had finally seen through her. After 3 days of deliberation, they came back with a guilty verdict on all counts. Emma was sentenced to 4 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 2 years. She was also ordered to pay restitution to Michael for his legal fees and to me for the value of the ring, even though I'd gotten the ring back. The judge said the restitution was for the emotional harm and the breach of trust. "Mrs. Carter," the judge said at sentencing, "you embarked on a calculated scheme to defraud the Peterson family. You pretended to be someone you weren't. You lied consistently and deliberately. And when your scheme didn't work out the way you'd planned, you engaged in harassment and attempted theft. Your behavior has been reprehensible from start to finish. I hope you use your time in prison to reflect on your choices and to develop some sense of moral compass." Emma was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, and I finally felt like I could breathe again. Michael and I went out to dinner that night to celebrate. Not celebrate that Emma was going to prison. I didn't take any joy in that. But celebrate that it was finally over, that we could move on with our lives. "I'm sorry I brought her into our family," Michael said over dinner. "I'm sorry you had to go through all of this." "I know," I told him, for what felt like the 100th time. "You didn't know. She fooled both of us, but we figured it out and we dealt with it. That's what matters." "I keep thinking about what might have happened if you hadn't given her that ring," Michael said. "If you'd waited longer, if she had more time to work on us, she might have gotten away with it." He was probably right. If I'd waited, Emma might have convinced Michael to ask me for money. She might have found some other way to get her hands on our assets. The ring, as terrible as that whole situation had been, it actually exposed her before she could do worse damage. "Everything happens for a reason," I said. "Your grandmother's ring protected us one more time." Life slowly got back to normal after that. Michael moved out of my house and got his own apartment. He threw himself into work and started rebuilding his life. He was cautious about dating, understandably gun-shy after Emma, but eventually he started putting himself out there again. I went back to my routines, my garden, my volunteer work at the church. Some of the people who'd believed Emma's lies never came back around, but the friends who mattered stayed. And I'd made new friends through the whole ordeal. Patricia, for one, who'd become someone I could call and talk to, and several of the other lawyers and staff at her firm who'd heard about my case and had reached out with support. About a year after Emma went to prison, Michael came over for Sunday dinner and brought someone with him. Her name was Jennifer, and she was a teacher at a local elementary school. She was sweet and genuine, with an easy laugh and an obvious affection for Michael. "I've heard so much about you," Jennifer said when Michael introduced us. "Michael says you make the best apple pie in the world." "I don't know about that," I said, liking her immediately, "but I'd be happy to teach you how to make it if you'd like." "I'd love that," Jennifer said. This time I was more cautious. I watched Jennifer carefully over the months that followed, looking for red flags, for signs that she might be another Emma. But Jennifer was exactly what she appeared to be, a kind, honest woman who loved my son and who enjoyed spending time with me because she genuinely liked me, not because she wanted something from me. She asked about my life, my interests, my memories of Robert. She shared stories about her own family, her own struggles and triumphs. She was open about her student loans. She had about $30,000 of debt from her teaching degree, and she was working hard to pay them off. She never asked me for money or hinted that she expected help. When Michael offered to help her with the loans, she declined, saying she wanted to handle her own responsibilities. "But I appreciate the offer," she told him. "It means a lot to know you'd be willing to help if I really needed it." That was the difference. Jennifer had integrity. Emma only had greed. Michael and Jennifer got engaged 2 years after they started dating. This time, Michael asked for my blessing first. "Are you sure about her?" I asked him. "I don't want you to think I'm questioning your judgment, but after Emma—" "I'm sure, Mom," Michael said firmly. "Jennifer is nothing like Emma. I've learned to see the difference. Jennifer doesn't want anything from us except to be part of the family. And I love her, really love her, not the way I thought I loved Emma." I gave them my blessing, and they had a small, intimate wedding at Jennifer's parents' home. It was beautiful and simple and filled with genuine love and happiness. No pretense, no performance, just two people who really cared about each other, committing to a life together. At the reception, Jennifer pulled me aside. "I know you gave Michael's first wife a ring that belonged to your mother," she said carefully, "and I know that didn't end well. I want you to know that I don't expect anything like that from you. I don't need family heirlooms or expensive gifts. I just want to be part of this family if you'll have me." I smiled and hugged her. "You already are part of this family, and someday, when the time is right, maybe I'll give you that ring. But for now, let's just enjoy today." "That sounds perfect," Jennifer said. I still have my mother's ring, safely tucked away in my jewelry box. Maybe someday I'll give it to Jennifer, or maybe I'll give it to a grandchild if Michael and Jennifer have children, or maybe I'll just keep it for myself, a reminder of everything I've survived and overcome. About 2 weeks after Jennifer and Michael's wedding, I was going through some old photos and found one of Emma from her first visit to my house, the day she brought me sunflowers. In the photo, she's smiling that warm smile that had fooled me so completely. I looked at that photo for a long time, remembering that day, remembering how hopeful I'd felt about having her in our lives. Then I tore it up and threw it away. Some people come into your life as blessings, and some come as lessons, and Emma Carter had definitely been a lesson, an expensive, painful, infuriating lesson, but a lesson nonetheless. I walked over to my jewelry box and opened it, taking out my mother's ring. The emerald-cut diamond caught the afternoon light and sparkled, just like it had that night when I gave it to Emma. But the ring survived. It had come back home, and it would be here when the right person, at the right time, was ready to receive it with the respect and love it deserved. I put the ring back in its velvet box and closed the lid. Some things are worth more than money, and some people will never understand that, but that's their loss, not mine.